I was a piece of property, worth a few $100s on a ledger in Charleston, South Carolina. But I had a secret that the masters never understood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the History Speaks for Itself podcast and YouTube channel.
Prepare yourself for the most amazing and fascinating real stories from our heroes of the past.
So let's move immediately to our next guest with his unbelievable story. Believe me, you don't want to miss it.
Look closely at this face. Do not look away. You see the deep lines. You see the scars that time has carved. People pass me on the street today, an old man in a suit, and they tip their hats. They see a congressman. They see a gentleman, but they do not know what lies behind these eyes. Behind these eyes, I am still watching the dark water. I am still holding my breath, waiting for the cannon fire that could turn me into ash. My name is Robert Smalls, and before I was a congressman, before I was a general, before I was a legend, I was a ghost. I was a piece of property, worth a few $100s on a ledger in Charleston, South Carolina. But I had a secret that the masters never understood. They thought they owned my body. They thought they owned my labor, but they never owned my mind. And they certainly never owned my rage. Let me take you back to 1862. The Civil War was tearing the sky apart. I was working on the Charleston docks. I was a slave, yeah, but I was not in the fields. I was on the water. I had a gift for the tides. I could read the currents of the harbor like other men read a newspaper. Because of this gift, my masters put me to work on the CSS Planter. The Planter. She was a beauty, a paddle wheel steamer converted into a gunboat. She was fast, she was strong, and she was deadly. She carried the ammunition for the Confederate Army. Every day, I steered that ship. A black man in chains, was piloting the very weapon that was keeping my people in bondage. Can you imagine the irony? Can you taste the bitterness of it? The white officers and Captain Relia and his men, they grew comfortable with me. Arrogance is a powerful drug. It blinds you. They saw a good boy. They saw a servant who tipped his hat and said, "Yes, sir." They didn't see that I was memorizing their maps. They didn't see that I was learning the secret signals required to pass the forts. 2 long blows on the whistle, 1 short. Blow, blow, blip. I kept that rhythm in my head, but comfort is dangerous. In April, the fear came. The war was going badly for the South. They were getting desperate. I heard whispers on the docks, cruel whispers. They were planning to move the slaves inland, away from the coast. They were going to separate us. I went home to my wife, Hannah. I looked at my children. I imagined them being dragged away, and something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, it was quiet. It was the sound of a lock clicking open. I told Hannah, "We are leaving." She looked at me, terrified. She whispered, "How?" "The patrols are everywhere." I looked her in the eye and said, "I am not going to run through the swamps. I am going to take their ship. I am going to take the Planter." The date was set, May 12th, 1862. The plan relied on one crucial mistake by the Confederate officers. We knew they liked to spend their nights on shore. Against all military regulations, they would leave the Planter docked at the wharf, with only the crew, the slave crew, on board. Night fell. The air was thick. I watched as Captain Relia and his officers walked down the gangplank. They were laughing, smoking cigars. I watched their silhouettes disappear into the city. I whispered to the crew, "It is time." We picked up our families hidden on another steamer nearby. I went into the captain's cabin. I saw his uniform, his heavy wool coat, his wide-brimmed straw hat. My hands, they were shaking. Just for a moment. I put on the coat. It smelled of tobacco and authority. I put on the hat. I pulled it low, shadowing my face. In the darkness, I was no longer Robert the slave. I was the captain. We lit the boilers. The wood crackled like gunshots. I thought every soldier in Charleston would hear us. But the city slept. We cast off. When my wife stepped onto the deck, that was the hardest moment. She was holding the baby so tight her knuckles were white. There was no smiling, just pure, cold terror. I told the men, if they catch us, we do not surrender. We blow the ship. We go down together. Free. Now came the gauntlet. To reach the ocean, we had to sail past 5 Confederate forts. 5, each one armed with heavy artillery. We passed the first fort. I gave the signal, 2 long, 1 short. The steam screamed into the night. My heart stopped, but the sentry on the wall just waved. He saw the Confederate flag flying high. He saw the captain in the straw hat. He waved us through. We passed the second fort, the third. But ahead of us, rising out of the black water like a tombstone, was Fort Sumter, the monster, the place where the war began. If I made one mistake, if I steered slightly off course, we were dead. I stood in the pilot house. I crossed my arms exactly the way Captain Relia stood. I kept my face in the shadow. I steered straight toward the guns. It felt like walking into a lion's mouth. We were under the walls now. I pulled the whistle cord. Beep, 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 silence. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, the voice of the sentinel boomed. Pass the planter. Blow be to ye. I let out a breath I had been holding for 20 years. We accelerated. We passed the fort, but we weren't safe. Not yet. We were now in no man's land. The sun was beginning to rise, and there, on the horizon, I saw them. The Union fleet, the USS Onward. To them, we were a Confederate gunboat coming to attack. I saw their cannons swivel toward us. They were going to blow us out of the water. The flag, I shouted. Take down the flag. My men tore down the Confederate banner, that symbol of our chains. Hannah ran up with a dirty white bedsheet she had stolen from the hotel. We raised it. On the Onward, a sailor spotted it. Hold fire, he shouted. White flag! Hold fire! The cannons paused. We drifted closer. The Union sailors were lining the rails, confused. They saw a Confederate ship, but the crew was black. I stepped out of the pilot house. For the first time that night, I took off the stolen straw hat. I let the morning sun hit my face. I looked up at the Union captain and shouted the words that would change my life forever. Good morning, sir. I have brought you some of the old United States guns, sir. The silence broke. The Union sailors began to cheer. They threw their hats in the air. I hugged Hannah. I kissed my children. The air tasted different. It tasted of salt, but mostly, it tasted of possibility. But I didn't stop there. I went to Washington. I met Abraham Lincoln. I told him, Mr. President, let us fight. And he listened. I became the first black captain of a United States vessel. I piloted the planter back into battle. I used the same cannons I had hauled for the Confederates to blast the very forts that had enslaved me. The war ended. I went home to Beaufort, but I did not return as a slave. I returned as a general. And then, poetic justice arrived. The house at 511 Prince Street, the mansion of the McKee family, my former masters. I had grown up in the backyard, forbidden to walk through the front door. After the war, they were ruined. The house went up for auction. And who was the highest bidder? Me, Robert Smalls. I bought the house. I sat on the front porch, drinking iced tea. But listen closely. I did not buy it for revenge. When the old Mrs. McKee had nowhere to go, I let her stay. Because I had learned that freedom isn't just about chains. It's about grace. It's about being bigger than the people who tried to keep you small. I didn't stop at the house. I went to Congress. 5 terms. I wrote the law that created the first free public school system in South Carolina, because ignorance is the only true slavery. Now, I am old. The year is 1915. I see dark clouds gathering, people trying to rewrite history, but they cannot erase me. They cannot erase the planter. They cannot erase the night we turned the cannons around. So, when you look at my face, do not just see an old man. See the captain. See the man who refused to wait for permission to be free. My legacy is not the ship. It is not the house. My legacy is you. The fact that you are listening to this story, that is my victory. I am Robert Smalls, and I am, and always will be, the captain of my own soul.